Bom dia a todos presentes. Hoje é dia 25 de maio, são 10 da manhã. Esse é o encontro com a professora Kathleen Stock, autora do livro Material Girls, porque a realidade importa para o feminismo. O encontro nasceu motivado pelo estudo do livro, que a gente fez parte do clube do livro, que a gente estudou a obra da autora, presente aqui na reunião. Posteriormente, na verdade, muito agora, eu resolvi abrir a conversa um pouco para outras, né, pessoas interessadas, pela questão ser de grande importância e ter pouco debate, né? A gente está aqui presente com a professora Kathleen e com a Ana Letícia, que é a tradutora do livro, e a Ana vai fazer, em parte, essa tradução simultânea. I thought first about to read the introduction by Marina Correlato for Diplomatique is a very good one. Discursos de gênero e suas consequências práticas à luz da filosofia feminista. É um texto introdutório da Marina Correlato para o Le Monde Diplomatique, Brasil. Em Material Girls, porque a realidade importa para o feminismo, a filósofa Kathleen Stock faz um exame acessível sobre os discursos acerca de gênero e identidade de gênero, e fornece uma exploração intelectual das consequências materiais da adoção irrestrita desse pensamento filosófico por parte de instituições e movimentos sociais em diversos países, sobretudo para mulheres, crianças e homossexuais. Embora suas análises se apoiem majoritariamente em informações, eventos e dados do Reino Unido, existe uma tendência global em tratar como fato a existência da identidade de gênero como característica inata, em contrapartida, a leitura do sexo biológico como algo socialmente atribuído. Como consequência da adoção irrestrita dessa perspectiva em diversos países, estabeleceu-se a prática de vetar vozes dissonantes e ignorar as consequências do apagamento legal e linguístico do sexo, inclusive na academia, que se desenvolveu a partir dos centros do capitalismo global, sobretudo nos Estados Unidos. Isso torna o exame de Stock relevante para além das fronteiras britânicas, permitindo que pessoas em diferentes países e contextos possam compreender as motivações ideológicas, estratégicas e discursivas e práticas políticas estratégicas discursivas e práticas políticas consistentes desse fenômeno. No primeiro capítulo, aí ela vai, né, quebrando capítulo a capítulo, assim, mas é basicamente isso, né? Kathleen, sorry, it's my Brazilian pronunciation of your name.
It's fine.
You can introduce yourself.
So I live in England. I'm originally from Scotland. I was a professor of philosophy at the University of Sussex in England, and I worked there for 18 years. I specialized in fiction, philosophy of fiction. And at the end of my career, towards the end of my career, although I did not know it was the end of my career at the time, I became interested in gender, and I was very worried about political threats, I thought, to women's rights through gender identity. I started to write and to speak publicly about transactivism, and in particular, the idea that gender identity is the most important determinant of your rights. And I got a lot of controversy around my work, which I can talk about later if you like. A lot of protests and a lot of problems. I published the book that you have read, I think, some of you, and eventually some protests, some very active, threatening protests came to my campus with me as the target, and I decided to leave my job. So now I write freelance, and I run an organization called the Lesbian Project. I'm a lesbian as well. Okay.
Kathleen, people are curious. We talk a lot about the book, but we are curious about what changed since the book, in your views. What do you think that changed since the... It's one of the first questions people do
Okay.
here.
I think in Britain, in the UK, things have changed a lot. Partly because of women and feminist groups speaking out and organizing meetings and facing a lot of hostility. But what has happened is the right-wing press, and I mean, I don't mean far right, I mean center-right wing press, the Times, the Telegraph, so big newspapers have picked up in the last year or two on stories around trans activism. So in schools, in universities, in hospitals, and because before, a few years ago, there was a kind of media blackout, but now newspapers are talking about it. And even occasionally, left-wing newspapers are talking about it, The Guardian sometimes, because they've been forced to.
Yeah.
We also have a general election coming up. It was announced yesterday or the day before. It will be on July the 3rd. And I know that all the major candidates will be asked, what is a woman? Can you define a woman? That will happen because it's been happening for about a year. And every time a politician says something stupid, like 2 years ago, the Labour leader said 99% of women don't have a penis or something. Everybody laughs, everybody thinks it's ridiculous. So that has changed a lot. So it's politically much more on the radar, and it's in the media a lot more. Yeah. So there's a couple more things that have changed. One is about children specifically, because there's been this report, some of you may have heard of it, called the Cass Review, which was commissioned by our National Health Service to give a complete survey of all the available evidence for puberty blockers. And it was a very eminent pediatrician, Dr. Hilary Cass, who was in charge of the review. And she has found that there's really no good evidence for the use of puberty blockers. And there's some evidence that they might do harm. So the use of puberty blockers has been suspended in the UK, and that's a major step, which we hope will have implications for the world, really, because it's a medical review that shows the state of the current evidence. So that's brilliant. And then they also closed the gender identity service here last year, which for children, the Tavistock, which was notoriously bad at observing, well, you know, people were on puberty blockers after 2 sessions. There was no follow-up of cases long-term. There was all sorts of other problems there too. So they've closed that, and they're trying to build some new services which are much more holistic and embedded in children's mental health services more generally. So that's positive.
Is that even after Cass review, some of health, some people in the health area still in denial. Why do you think that people still in denial?
Well, because people are in denial because there's a huge financial incentive to be in denial, and also a reputational incentive, because some people have staked their whole careers on saying that there are trans children, that they need intervention as soon as possible, that there are no detransitioners, you know, all the lies that we've heard for years. So there's a huge interest in denying it. But it's particularly bad in America. And I think that's partly, I mean, it's hard to say, but they don't have a national health service. So one advantage that Britain has, and maybe Brazil, is that we have a national health service. So you can't just set up on your own. You have to at least get, I mean, we have a few private providers, but they are very regulated. Whereas in America, it's a lot more decentralized. Healthcare is. So it's much easier for surgeons to just do pretty much what they want, as far as I can see. So it's America that's the problem, because what happens in America, in the US, will make a difference across the whole world. So we just have to keep pushing there now. And there are many people trying to have a better conversation with US healthcare. Another problem is Biden. Biden's regime at the moment is all in, you know, for gender identity. They've changed Title IX, or they're going to change Title IX. So sports will be open to trans-identified males, and they have this sentimental attitude towards trans kids, that they are saving their life. You know, they believe all the suicide myths, apparently. So eventually when the US wakes up to this what terrible things are happening there, then I think the rest of the world will have to listen as well.
Hi, Kathleen. I also live in the UK, and I have followed your drama closely, I mean, through the news. It's a pleasure to be here.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. The thing is that what Aleta wants us to share with you is that we have realized, and there's a vast reading around that Brazilian, Latin American trans-identified males have been like the excuse for everything that's been happening in the north of the globe. So, like, in the scenario of a country like Brazil that is very homophobic, racist, and a country that has lots of inequalities, right? So you do have transvestites people, which are acute gay men that end up in prostitution, lack of opportunities in their lives, humongous internalized homophobia, and it's a very cultural treat. So, and I'm not saying that's a good thing. I mean, of course, they are violence, but these numbers are being used to then convince the audience, the north of the globe, that we are under attack, or that. So currently, I think here in the UK, it's like one person that is trans-identified has died in like 10 years.
4 years. 4 years, but on average, one a year, and some years none. So
the institutions in Brazil are sending wrong, fake, and invented data to the worldwide institutions, such as the transgender monitor. There's this death monitor thing. So, okay, these of course, there is violence, and there are trans-identified people dying in the context of prostitution.
Yeah, I know.
From male violence, the clients kill them. Yeah.
I have made this point many times because I've seen it when I worked at the University of Sussex on Transgender Day of Remembrance, this kind of holy day where everyone has to light candles, and someone at the university would read out a list of all the trans people that had been killed from transphobia since the last Trans Day of Remembrance. And they would read out this list, and it would all be Brazilian, Argentinian names. I mean, they couldn't pronounce them. And 60% are in prostitution. And that is obviously a terrible problem, violence and prostitution, but it's not the same problem as transphobia. So it enrages me still that we are, and it's a good example of how the trans activist movements just picks
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Aleta and Kathleen, for this meeting. I'm such a big fan of both of you and for a long, long time. Do you think that we are living a modern kind of mass hysteria? I'm very interested in how philosophy helped to, you know, to on this place and to see these things beyond our issues as women, but also like a mass hysteria and now this modern world. Why are we believing all this nonsense? Because we both know and we know all this is nonsense. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. So yes, I think it is a mass hysteria. I think we're particularly susceptible in this present moment because we think we are so clever, because we think we are so enlightened. We don't, if you look at history, there are many, many cases of people on a large scale believing impossible things. And we are at the moment in that kind of moment. But there are contextual reasons. One is the internet. Clearly, the internet is disembodied. People mostly, they can sit online inventing a persona for themselves, and they get a lot of feedback, they get validation, but they don't get real world encounters. And certainly if people are feeling bad about their bodies and their faces, that will get worse on the internet, potentially. So that's one reason. I think another reason is that on the left, maybe on the right too, but particularly on the modern left, there is this kind of obsession with victimhood and obsession with being a good person and performing your virtue on the internet. And it's a very quick way to show that you're good by saying trans women are women. It's a kind of performance that, you know, it's like a religious rite. It's like transubstantiation or something like that. I think on the right, as you said, and maybe across the board, there's homophobia, which is making it very easy for people to believe this Platonic myth that the body and the soul can be separated and that the soul can be in the wrong body. So we have a lot of Christian and Platonic and Judeo-Christian kind of imagery that it sits in our heads and helps us or hinders us from seeing things properly. We have the internet, which is disembodying us, and we have this culture of performance of goodness. And I think all of those things are making it worse.
So the question is asking you how to avoid the danger of association made by common sense between women, feminist women who criticize gender on the right, because there are many obviously far-right non-feminists who know what are men and what are women, right? And they're talking about it. And how can we keep ourselves politically differentiated?
This is a debate which has really become extremely toxic in the UK, in the feminist and sex realist sphere. And I have some views, but they aren't, maybe, you know, some of you may disagree with me. But I am allergic to guilt by association. I have become allergic to it because it's been used so often against me. So now when someone calls me a fascist, I just laugh because, you know, it's such a ridiculous, over hysterical kind of accusation. I mean, everyone's a fascist these days. We're all fascists. We're all TERFs, etc. However, yes, of course, on every put it this way, thousands of different groups and people know what a man and what a woman is. We all do, in fact. Nearly all of us know what a man and a woman is. We were born, you know, it was hardwired into us to recognize the sexes. We are a species that reproduces by recognizing the opposite sex. So of course, some religious groups will know what a man and a woman is. Some left-wing groups will know what a man and a woman is. Some right-wing groups, some far-right groups, some far-left groups. You know, everybody knows what a man and a woman is, really. And I think I am very wary of infighting, which happens in the UK, you know, constantly calling out Posie Parker. I'm sure some of you know Posie Parker. You know, she is on the right. She may be on the far right. I can't tell. But there's a huge, you know, war goes on amongst feminists from the left against the right. And I just try and ignore it because I think most people can see that by example, I am not a fascist. I am actually on the left. And I concentrate on the issues and explaining the issues clearly. And I try not to get caught up in denunciation, in purity spirals. I just can't stand any of that myself. So.
But what do you think that could break this spell? What could break this spell?
What breaks the spell? I think I have to say, naming reality is the #1 way to break the spell. Of course, the person who names reality and breaks the spell gets all this hostility at them. But so I've always said, you know, trans women are male. They are male with male genitalia. They are mostly heterosexual males, you know, they're autogynephiles. So just name that, you know, constantly say transgender women, trans women are male. If you want it, say trans-identified male. I don't know what the equivalent is. Nowadays, and I just did a trip to America, I said trans women are men. And I said it to the camera, I said it in podcasts, I said trans women are men, trans women are men, trans women are men. And I could see the audience all going, but you have, and that's what I do now. I go to different countries, I say the things that cannot be said, and then I leave. But they just are. So I know, of course, I don't think you should go up to a particular trans woman and say, you're a man, because people really don't like that. They don't, that when they're looking, they think that, you know, they think you're cruel, they think you're being unfair. But if you're just being general, trans women are all men. They wouldn't be trans women if they weren't men. You know, you don't have women who are trans women. So just name reality every time you can and be prepared to take the hostility. But if everybody named reality, this would disappear like that, you know?
Just to make a panorama for you what happened here, we have already like teachers, university professors being accused of transphobia. We have women also responding on legal action, no, to call a man a man. We have cases of women being aggressively challenging inside of the bathrooms in university. Also in normal school for children have sometimes we see like videos online of like transgender identified males pushing girls, and everything's kind of we are in the middle of this nonsense, but there are no now all the mainstream media are just not talking about it. I invite some journalists, I send some invitations for today, but even the mainstream feminists, they don't want to talk about it. That's it.
It's difficult. I feel very if maybe you can anyone listening who thinks that I personally can do something to help, then you can maybe email me after, because I would be very happy to connect you to other people or to participate in any way you wanted. I mean, I have nothing to lose now.
Yeah.
By this, you know, and everybody knows what I think, so there's nothing you can expose about me that people don't already know. So I feel I'm very sorry when I hear what's happening in Brazil. I'm so sorry. It sounds absolutely terrible.
É o seguinte, na tragédia do Rio Grande do Sul, e a Letícia pode contextualizar um pouquinho para a Kathleen, a gente viu mulheres dizendo que mulheres trans precisavam de maquiagem de sapato tamanho 40, sapato feminino tamanho 40, né? Então, assim, numa situação em que você perdeu tudo, que mulher estaria dizendo que precisava de batom e de sapato bonito no contexto de uma enchente, de estar no abrigo, de perder casa, de tudo que você tem tá, na melhor das hipóteses, dentro de uma mochila só, né? Isso A pergunta que eu quero fazer é como é que a construção da mulher, a partir da visão trans, interfere na construção da mulher para todas nós? Quer dizer, a indústria da estética já nos matava com cirurgias, no esforço para a gente agradar. Agora que a gente tem uma mulher que é dita como mulher, se construindo esteticamente, cirurgicamente, como é que se interfere na nossa visão de todos nós sobre a mulher?
I think obviously trans women are not a homogenous group. They are not one thing. There are gay men and there are autogynephiles who have a fetish. So I don't know which ones we're talking about here, but the ones who have femininity as a fetish and who basically become aroused at the thought of themselves as a woman tend to wear very exaggerated, sometimes extremely unflattering, florals and kind of excessively feminine outfits because it is part of their fetish. I think with gay men, there's something different going on. Again, though, very more like drag. And I do think actually, I have noticed women, like younger women, especially on TikTok and on social media generally, and particularly in the States, in the US, but I don't know about Brazil, but they look like drag queens, some of them, excessive eyelashes, excessive long blonde hair and loads of makeup and very high heels and very plunging necklines. And it is a drag performance. So I think that I do think that there is actually a strange kind of
effect,
circle. I don't know how to put it, but there is some kind of weird mutual influence going on between young women and maybe particularly gay men into the construction of femininity. And of course it is unhealthy for women. It's very unhealthy for women.
Porque ela pergunta por quê, né? Das mulheres estarem nessa situação maternando essa pauta com tanto afinco? De onde que isso sai?
Women in general are more agreeable. They are less confrontational than men. So that's one thing. I think there is definitely a pity element to a lot of women's responses. They pity a man in a dress. I think it's a kind of homophobia, actually. They feel some kind of disgust and they transmute that into pity, and then it becomes, oh, be kind to the, it's very patronizing, be kind to the poor man. So there's that. Also, the other aspect, which I think some of you, me have experienced, is that transactivism gives women a tool to compete with each other, and can be weaponized against other women. So if you're in an organization and you have rivals, you can denounce one of your rivals. You can, if you don't like that girl anyway, you can use transactivism to, you can say she's a TERF. There's actually layers of this, but one of the things we don't talk about is how women use these ideas against other women to punish them. So there's obviously passive aggression there. So there's a combination of mothering, pity, and hatred of other women, I think.
Porque o que a gente está vendo aqui, né, gente? Tem incentivo atualmente. Concurso público passou a cota ou não? Alguém sabe me explicar?
Não passou, mas porque a lei originária das cotas não contempla, porque eles têm que respeitar uma lei básica lá de cotas, entendeu? Essa foi a justificativa do governo.
Okay.
Para universidades e concurso público, não, mas tem várias ofertas de emprego que têm essas cotas já, né, estabelecidas.
Mestrado já tem, né? Mestrado já tem. Mestrado já tem.
Gente, sobre cotas, algumas universidades estão adotando isso, né, mas individualmente, a UF, Universidade Federal Fluminense, é uma delas. Existe cota, perdão, existe cota para o mestrado e para o doutorado, e a cota inclui um item para pessoas trans não binárias, que literalmente quer dizer qualquer coisa, né? Então, assim, embora não haja uma diretriz do ponto de vista do STF, por exemplo, as universidades estão tomando essas liberdades, sim. Outra coisa, nos processos internos, na distribuição de scholarships, o que a gente vê é que algumas instituições, como a Fundação Fiocruz, ao receber as bolsas da CAPES, distribuem as bolsas da CAPES internamente segundo critérios afixados por uma comissão, que é composta de alunos, professores e funcionários, e que contempla, sim, pessoas tronchas. Então, embora não haja uma diretriz, uma política escrita na lei e tal, tudo isso está acontecendo e em organizações públicas e com caráter bastante oficial. Então, assim, embora não haja uma lei, né, a gente já tem as políticas em curso na prática.
Okay.
I think it would be illegal to yes, it would be, I'm pretty sure it would be illegal to make it easier for trans people to get into universities, for instance. However, I think indirectly there's lots and lots of benefits, because quite often a job advert will say, we encourage applications from the following groups: people of color, trans people, LGBTQ++, which is everybody. And so, although they haven't said, yes, we'll definitely give this to a trans person, your chances are probably higher for certain jobs. I think maybe also for certain kinds of grants. I mean, that is one definite public benefit. If you look at, and I did look at charity funding, trusts and foundations and grants. There's a public database. You can look up all the grants that have been made in the last 15 years by major and small charities. The words trans and queer, you know, in the last 10 years, the grants have just gone up like this. The word lesbian has gone down like this, you know. So yes, there's definitely been a large number of indirect benefits to if you can say you're trans, but nothing as explicit as making it easier to get into university. That is the first time I've ever heard of that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How was for you the process, like to experience a witch hunt in modern times? I ask you because I lived something near, and there are other women here that live a close experience. And how do you keep this, like, in your position, like, strong?
Well, like you, I've talked a lot before about how awful it was, and I think it was awful. I was very unhappy, but I honestly think going through something like that is a fascinating life-enhancing experience, maybe. You have to look for the positives, and I lost a lot of naivety. I understood so much more about human relationships. I understood more about politics. You know, I learned so much. I now understand the cowardice of institutions in a way I never did before, because before I was just like, you know, a blind, naive, progressive, thinking that everything was okay and feminism was sorting things out and we were the good guys. And now I see the hypocrisy of the left, a lot of the left. I see cowardice, I see cognitive dissonance, you know, all these things, and how fallible we all are as well to mass hysteria and groupthink. So I feel stronger now, and I feel released that I can say what I think more. So I really think if you've been through something like this, it's like being forged in a fire. Like it's like you're steel, you're made of metal, and you are forged stronger and harder at the end. So that's what I would say. That's my positive account.
Yeah, I can see also. Como é que qual seria o público-alvo do livro, se tinha um público-alvo, mas eu vou acrescentar uma outra pergunta, que é que desdobramentos ela viu após a publicação do livro que ela não podia imaginar? Que tipo de surpresas ela foi aconteceram? Que tipo de surpresas, desdobramentos que não imagináveis, assim, bons ou ruins?
Yes. I wanted to write it as clearly as possible. So I definitely wanted to speak to the general public and explain some of the ideas in a way that everyone could understand. But I also wanted to talk to well, firstly to people who had never really thought about this before. And secondly, to people on the left-ish or the center left, center right, maybe, but you know, people who are just a bit confused. and who have just been going along with this stuff because they think it's the right thing to do, and also because they're intimidated by the ideas and they're intimidated by the toxicity. So I really just wanted to kind of explain in simple language how bad these ideas are, how philosophically stupid they are, and that the emperor has no clothes, as we say. You know, the emperor has no clothes, but in a in a respectful, calm, kind of a way that brings people in. I wanted to try and bring people in.
Yeah.
I didn't expect it to do so well. I mean, it was it was reviewed almost entirely positively in the UK newspapers. It's been translated, as you know, into Brazilian Portuguese, German, French, Spanish, Korean. It's going to be published in Korean. It's going to be published in Japanese, Taiwan, Taiwan Chinese. I mean, it's published, it's being translated in lots of different places. I did not expect that at all. So yeah, I had no idea that it would make that much, have that impact. I just didn't.
Very simple question, I think is important. How do you think that all this situation reflects in the life of mothers?
I mean, I think mothers have been absent from many of the discussions that led us here, because really this came from LGBT world, or LGBT world. And, you know, most lesbians don't have children, most gay men don't have children. And trans women sometimes have children, but, you know, quite often, you know, they're men. So that mothers have been excluded from policy decisions that affect children in particular. And if mothers had been consulted earlier, then obviously we would not be here. I mean, some mothers have gone along with it, but most mothers, I'm a mother, you know, we know that there's something wrong with the idea of a 5-year-old child being born in the wrong body. You know, most mothers, you know, I'm generalizing, but I do feel like the idea of surgery on teenagers and puberty blockers on 11-year-olds is something that for most mothers you just would not want that for your child. These days, unfortunately, some mothers believe that this is right because they've heard it from experts, you know, so-called experts. But a lot of this was laid down by gay men and trans-identified men, and it's a way of kind of getting the right story, you know, retrofitting your story, because they say, oh, well, I was, you know, trapped in the wrong body, or, you know, I was a girl when I was very young, I knew I was a girl. And they have to invent trans children basically to fit the narrative. And mothers did not get a chance to say, hang on a minute, this does not make sense. So I also think there's obviously a lot of misogyny towards mothers in particular. So when we do try and protect our children, we're called conservative, and Karen, you know, the word Karen is whatever, but they've developed these words to make us seem like we're very socially conservative because we want to protect children.
So, Caitlin, I wanted to ask you, so, you know, I was also a part of the LGBT community, and it's so sad today to see that I'm kind of like scared, to be honest, about even talking about my sexual orientation, because there's going to be so many questions. And now that I guess I identify with the TERF, it's even more complicated. But I wanted to about you, like, how does this go? It feels like that it's not even LGBTQ anymore. It's just gay. It's just gay men. Like, the lesbians are just being put aside. Oh, and where do you think this is gonna go? Because it's really scary.
Well, good question. So with me and my friend Julie Bindel, who's a radical feminist, have started an organization in the UK called the Lesbian Project. And we are trying to draw attention to the needs and the interests of lesbians, because they are completely lost in the rainbow. You know, in Britain, there's LGBTQIA++, you know, it grows all the time. Asexuals are now in the rainbow, for instance, which is ridiculous. So that's one thing. And I actually think, I'm not saying it's us, but I think in the UK, the official mainstream LGBTQ organizations have noticed that they haven't done anything for lesbians for years. So they are now trying to pretend that they care about lesbians. But the problem is that they cannot define what a lesbian is, because there are some trans women that are lesbians too. So we cannot have our own bars or our own groups, according to them, because we have to be inclusive, and inclusive is the word that means everybody can come in. So it's a mess. So I think, yes, there's particular dangers for lesbians. Obviously, butch lesbians quite often are the ones who've transitioned into and become trans men. And then we've got trans women saying they're lesbians too. Where it's all going is a backlash against lesbian and gay people, I'm afraid. When the world realizes what has been done to children and what has been done in prisons, you know, and sports, you know, when the world finally catches up, and because they can see that this makes no sense, we will be blamed, I think, because we are part of the LGBTQ plus rainbow. So I think it's in the interests of lesbians to say, we are not involved with this, and gay men, actually, we want nothing to do with this. And there are a few organizations like LGB Alliance in Britain. There's one in America called Gays Against Groomers. I don't know. I'm not endorsing them. I'm just saying I don't know much about them. But there are groups where gay men and lesbians are coming out and saying, not in our name. We don't want anything to do with this. So
my question would be about, well, you started saying we have to put the right names to the things. One of my concerns are about the word, or how we create it and start to use the word phobia. For instance, transphobia or lesbophobia. It always started with homophobia, right? How we are using, or we start to use it for everything. I think that was a mistake. We, as a movement, maybe unconsciously, maybe ended up doing, like using this for every dissent, everything, like hate, in discrimination. These are different things, right? But we ended up using all this word, and in the end, the word phobia, transphobia, or lesbophobia, or homophobia, doesn't matter. It's kind of empty because it's used for everything, and in the end, our debate stops there, because you can just say it's phobia.
I totally agree.
Using my words, so that's transphobia, or whatever phobia it is. But you see what I mean?
I agree. I mean, it's not just that word, phobia. There's also trauma, hate. All the words are big, and they're used too broadly. I actually, I don't like the word lesbophobia. I am now allergic to phobia words, because I've heard them so often. My friend Julie, who runs this organization with me, she doesn't use the word lesbophobia. She says anti-lesbian discrimination or something like that. But generally, I agree with you. We need to somehow get the language back and make distinctions between things that are different. So not everybody has PTSD. Not everyone is traumatized. Not everyone is a victim of hatred. You're right. It is emptying the discourse of meaning. So I totally agree.
A minha questão é que eu vejo que aqui o transativismo ele tem, né, uma capacidade, ele faz um esforço muito grande de tornar esse assunto muito atrativo para os jovens, principalmente. E eu fico muito preocupada com essa questão dos jovens, tanto pelas modificações corporais que eles fazem, quanto por espalhar esse contágio social, né? E eu estava pensando com um grupo de mulheres se seria interessante a gente fazer um movimento de buscar tornar esse feminismo crítico de gênero também atrativo, né, principalmente para os jovens, e eu queria saber se ela vê isso, se ela viu isso acontecendo por lá, essa busca de tornar isso mais atrativo, e principalmente, né, com os mais jovens ali para competir com o transativismo, e se sim, como.
Yes, we should. I actually, looking at you all on my screen, you are a lot younger than the average UK TERF. So when I go to a meeting, in the UK, it's like the people like me or older. I'm 52, 51. They are like 60s, 65. And actually, I get depressed because I look at us and I think we are never going to attract 20-year-olds to our cause. But you all have a chance because you all look young. And, I think definitely we have to try. But also, I am told, I don't know if it's true, but I am told. So I have children. I have an 18-year-old. And he says that his generation are mostly over it. Like they make jokes about gender and they don't, they're not, it's just not their thing. The fashion is changing. So the problem in the UK is 30-somethings. They are, they're in jobs and they're in institutions and they're talking about pronouns and misgendering and all that stuff. But the younger generation, apparently the fashion is changing. So maybe that's true. I don't know.
Yeah, I have an idea.
Acho que a pergunta que eu vou fazer tem a ver em ser a última. Do conteúdo desse livro dela, que a gente leu, né? Lá no meio do livro, ela fala sobre ela ainda estar respeitando os pronomes, mas que ela mesma tinha dúvidas sobre isso, se ela estava confusa, ela própria, né? E eu fico pensando o seguinte, se caso haja uma nova edição do livro, se ela vai fazer alguma mudança do que ela escreveu ali, que hoje ela já não pensa igual e ela mudaria para fazer numa nova edição. Acho que a pergunta que eu vou fazer tem a ver em ser a última. Do conteúdo desse livro dela, que a gente leu, né? Lá no meio do livro, ela fala sobre ela ainda estar respeitando os pronomes, mas que ela mesma tinha dúvidas sobre isso, se ela estava confusa, ela própria, né? E eu fico pensando o seguinte, se caso haja uma nova edição do livro, se ela vai fazer alguma mudança do que ela escreveu ali, que hoje ela já não pensa igual e ela mudaria para fazer numa nova edição.
Well, the one issue that got most criticism from feminists or from gender critical people was the pronoun issue. When I published that book, it was the only mainstream publisher, it was the only book that had been published by a mainstream publisher in this area. And I had one offer from a publishing house. Everyone else declined. So I had to use preferred pronouns, pretty much. There was no way I couldn't. But what I did do to try and create some kind of discussion around that was to say, I am using preferred pronouns in this book, but I defend the right of women not to. And I also said that personally, I would not use preferred pronouns for any man who had committed violence against women, and I won't use them for children. So that was my way of trying to draw attention to the fact that you can do differently. If I had to write it again, I'm not sure I would use preferred pronouns, because I think it's important to name reality.
I think that's what everyone wanted to hear.
Yeah. But you know, but I just want to add that the counterpoint to that is that I was trying to draw in people who are nervous about this issue and who want to be kind and want to do the right thing. And if I had just been, you know, he, him, man all the way through, I think quite a lot of people would have just not read the book. So I think you have to build a bridge. I do think you have to build a bridge for people.
A gente extrapolou o horário. Eu vou agradecer a todo mundo, né? Estou tentando, desculpa meu inglês, meu português. Thank you so much. If you have a last word for us, like keep hope.
I just want to thank you, Aleta, and also everybody who read my book, and everyone in this group. And thank you for a great session. I feel inspired by talking to you all, and I really would like to help in any way. So just keep in touch with me, and I will, you know, be happy to help you if you want.
We want. Yeah.
That's good. That's
so
fine.
much. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
For all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Kathleen.